You'll know what happened in Washington on January the 6th last year. We all watched. A mob of President Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of the election result. The belief the election was stolen was widespread among Republican supporters. It still is. And the idea has been relentlessly pushed by Donald Trump. Before the election, he predicted it would be rigged, and once he'd lost, he carried on.
This is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen.
Lest there's any doubt, this isn't true. There's no evidence of widespread electoral fraud, but a lack of evidence wasn't stopping the president or his supporters. And so when Donald Trump called on people to head to Washington on January the 6th, they did, in their thousands. And we know what happened next. And the ramifications of that day have been felt ever since. First of all, there was an impeachment. The House of Representatives charged Mr. Trump with incitement of insurrection. The jurors in the impeachment trial were America's senators. Now, some Republicans had already criticised Donald Trump.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day.
But in the end, there was no conviction. The vast majority of Republican senators voted to acquit. That, though, would not be the only trial connected to January the 6th. The Justice Department had begun its own investigations, and in the past year, over 700 people have been arrested and charged. More than 70 have already been sentenced. There is a criticism of the Justice Department that it focused on the rioters themselves, but less on those who may have organised, funded or incited them. The department refutes that criticism, and also it's not the only source of scrutiny of what happened on that day. The Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, that's the lower house, set up a committee comprised of 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans. It began its hearings in July. Its vice chair is Republican and fierce Trump critic Liz Cheney.
If those responsible are not held accountable, and if Congress does not act responsibly, this will remain a cancer on our constitutional republic.
Well, since July, hundreds of people have been interviewed in private. Most agreed to talk, some had to be subpoenaed, and 2 key people refused to take part. The first was Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former presidential advisor. He was out of the White House long before January the 6th, but not out of politics. And in his podcast, the day before the attack, he said, "All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow." For this and for other reasons too, the January the 6th committee wanted to talk to him. But Steve Bannon didn't want to talk and has now been charged with criminal contempt of Congress, to which Steve Bannon has said this.
If the administrative state wants to take me on, bring it. Because we're here to fight this, and we're going to go on offense. And you stand by, you see how we're going to go on offense, okay?
The second person to defy the committee's subpoena was President Trump's former Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. He too has been found in contempt of Congress and may also face criminal charges. Now, Mr. Meadows had handed over thousands of pages of records, but then refused to cooperate further. But even that material was revelatory. We saw text messages he'd received during the attack. The Fox News host Laura Ingraham wrote, "This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy." Other messages were received the day before the attack. Fox News host Sean Hannity said, "I'm very worried about the next 48 hours. But there's one key figure whose testimony and evidence remains elusive.
We don't know a whole lot about what Donald Trump was doing. The reports are he was watching television during the early part of the attack on the Capitol. The question is, why didn't he take any kind of actions? Why did he wait so long to respond to this?
Former President Trump has, perhaps unsurprisingly, refused to cooperate. He's taken legal action to block the release of official White House communication records. These delays mean it's not certain the committee will finish its work before the midterm elections in November, and the politics of this remain far from predictable. While many condemned what happened, the idea that underpinned what happened remains. A year on from the storming of the Capitol, polls show 2/3 of Republicans believe voter fraud helped Joe Biden win. Given that that didn't happen, that raises profound questions about one of the 2 main parties in the world's most high-profile democracy. And the Democrats argue harm is already being done.
The root cause of January 6th is still with us today. It is the big lie, pushed by Donald Trump, that is undermining faith in our political system.
But for all this criticism, for all the convictions of those involved in the riot, Donald Trump remains the dominant political figure in the Republican Party, and it remains the case that he believes America's democracy was rigged, and so do his supporters. And if you believed that, you'd be furious, you'd be outraged. And so the emotion that drove January the 6th remains, and there's no reason to think it won't manifest itself again.